Well, the same jury that found him guilty on all 30 counts will decide whether Boston bomber Johar Tsarnaev faces life in prison or receives death. It is now 2 years since the explosion at the finish line of the Boston Marathon. 3 people died and hundreds injured, many of them maimed for life. In the days that followed, the Tsarnaev brothers also killed a police officer before Johar ran over his brother Tamerlan as they tried to escape. The defense never tried to say he didn't help set off the bombs or kill a police officer, but his lawyers tried to make the case that he acted under the influence of his older brother Tamerlan. Well, Randy Zelin is a criminal defense lawyer and former prosecutor. Look, the verdict was certainly no surprise, but the big question here right now is whether or not he will receive the death penalty. We were talking during the commercial break. I think that he's going to get it. You're saying absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Why?
I think a few things, and let's start with what you just said, which the verdict was no surprise. The brilliant strategy behind his lawyer, his lawyer, Judy Clark, the strategy was from the get-go, I want you to trust me. I want you to believe in me. I want to have credibility. So I'm going to tell you, the verdict, it's a non-issue. He did it. He should be condemned. He should be held accountable. Just like anything else in life where if I don't drive you crazy for everything that I want and I save what I want for the right time, you may be more likely to give it to me. So she saved it all for the punishment. Now she will come to them and say, remember, I have credibility with you. You trust me. I'm telling you, don't kill my client. And don't be surprised if that doesn't have a big impact.
Oh, but Randy, come on. Listen to the testimony here. This wasn't a long, drawn-out trial here. The witnesses that came in, the sobbing and crying, the emotion on the face of the jurors here, this has to have some sort of impact on them.
Another great point, except that it's already happened. Typically in the penalty phase, that's when the emotions, that's when the anger is supposed to rise to the surface. Remember, sympathy has no place in the courtroom, yet this trial was all about horror and outrage and anger. So when we now get to the penalty phase, the jury has already dealt with that. At some level, the wind has been taken out of the government's case because we've already been there with that. But now, Randy, Judy Clark, it's her time.
Okay, and look, she's a masterful criminal defense attorney here. But what about the anger, the outrage, or lack thereof, or emotion from Johar himself? He sat there motionless, sometimes, and not very looking at any of the witnesses or at the jury. That's got to have some impact upon them.
Well, think about that. Number one, since a mitigating factor in terms of not giving him the death penalty is what's going on in his brain. So to the extent that you can't figure out what's going on in his brain, that goes to the question of, is he really all there? Does he really all get it? Maybe he really was acting under this insane influence of the radicalization from his mother, his brother, their influences. He was 19 when this happened. And remember something else, he had been shot in the face. Who knows what's going on in his head now?
Well, but his mother also, on the other hand, how credible can she be? She says America's going to pay for all this. And of course, there's this whole question of him being a martyr. At the same token, where I perhaps agree with you is, of course, Massachusetts is not a death penalty state, although this is a federal case. Perhaps maybe, since that's a factor here, that might put him behind bars for the rest of his life. In a maximum security prison, 23 hours behind bars, 1 out, just a little window looking at the clouds. Worse. You don't want me to answer that question, do you? I don't want to answer that question.
You have a few things going on here. Number one, as you said, the community. That community is overwhelmingly against the death penalty. And just because you are death penalty eligible as a juror, that doesn't mean you're going to pull the plug. It simply means that you're open to it. So in that community, overwhelmingly against the death penalty. The church has come out against the death penalty. Then you have, again, as you perfectly noted, this notion of, well, if the people who do this to Americans and kill Americans, they themselves want to die. They want to be martyrs. So their end game is to be killed. So will an American jury actually fulfill that wish? Or maybe, you know what? I'm not going to give you what you want, but I'm going to make sure that you languish and you rot in a jail. You ain't going to get martyred that way.
Well, you're probably right. And, but I will say, I'm going to bet that he gets the needle.
What are we betting? How about we switch? I get to sit in your chair if I'm right.
Never in a million years. Randy Zelin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay.